Live. We are good to go. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Today we have kind of a full agenda. Senator Manning has graciously agreed to join us to give us some updates on what the legislature is doing. And then we have a review of the pepper ball policy. Those are going to be the two main items on the agenda tonight. Afterwards, we'll have some retreat information about our upcoming work planning session. And yeah, we'll go from there. So does anybody have any additions or changes to the agenda as it currently stands? Seeing none, I'm going to take that as unanimous consent to move forward. I don't think we've got anybody to give public comment yet. If you are interested in giving public comment, don't hesitate to raise your hand. Okay. So I just saw a chat from Macy saying that she is not going to be giving a liaison report later on. So we'll leave that part of the agenda open for Michael. I know Amanda is not going to be able to join us tonight either. So it'll be a kind of abbreviated liaison report. Seeing hands. If you...
I was just going to say that the CRB hasn't met yet this month. We meet next week. So I don't really have a liaison report either.
Cool. Jeremy?
While you're mentioning, did you mention that Dallas was not going to be able to attend tonight?
I did not mention that. I did not see that yet.
Okay. Yeah. So I just got the message. That's fairly new information. So
cool. So we've got.
I didn't hear what did Jeremy say?
Dallas also will not be able to join us tonight. So I think we're still hoping to see Silver, and most everyone else is accounted for. But yeah, if anybody wants to give public comment, raise your hand throughout any points. We'll jump into commissioner comments and then circle back with the attendees. Hello, Barbara. If you want to give a public comment. So commissioner comments. Let's start V and then Chantel.
Just want to welcome Senator Manning to our meeting. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. Chantel and then Macy, if you want to give one.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. Sorry, I missed the last meeting. I just got my vaccine shot yesterday, too, so I'm a little bit under the weather if I'm a little bit quiet tonight. But also welcome, Senator Manning. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Excellent. So reading Macy's message from earlier, I'm assuming she doesn't want to give a commissioner comment right now for crisis with a personal thing going on. So we'll jump to Jennifer and then Michael.
I don't have any official comment, but I'm glad to see everyone here and welcome to Senator Manning.
Excellent, thanks. Michael and then Alan.
Yep, I would repeat the welcome to Senator Manning. Appreciate you making the time to come meet with us. And that's all.
Alan and then Ian.
Hi, I was wondering if if the chief could give a report or somebody give a report back on the CSI feedback loops, anything they have this from. I didn't attend them, so any info we had on that would be good to hear about. Other than that, Senator Manning, welcome. I trust you have all those books behind you. You've read them all?
Every last one.
Okay, I've read all those.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. Ian and then Bonnie.
Welcome, Senator Manning. Thanks so much for joining us. And welcome, Michael, to the Police Commission. I wasn't able to make the last meeting because we were hosting our own vaccine clinic. Where we were able to vaccinate over 500 folks. Looking forward to more vaccine clinics that are community-based in the future, and I'll keep folks in the Police Commission appraised if they want to come to the Whitaker and get their poke. Really excited to hear the legislative updates tonight, and yeah, looking forward to hearing from everyone later on this evening.
Thanks, Ian. Bonnie, and then myself.
Happy to see everyone, and welcome Senator James Manning. And also, I want to just thank real quickly V. He did some research that really helped me out with some information, so thank you for that. And oh, and that research being with respect to just understanding better like where it is that money goes to in certain claims. Like, for example, the case of, just really briefly, the case of the Eugene Weekly reporter that was shot with pepper balls. So kind of on topic a little bit. So thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. For my own report, my own comment, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today and for your ongoing dedication and participation. It's really lovely to see you all. I'm not seeing any hands raised to give public comment. So let's jump right into our very first agenda item with Senator Manning. Senator, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in the legislature and your world?
All right. Well, first of all, let me say I am thrilled to be here again, and thank everybody. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing. I was on police commission, and I know that it is demanding. It's time. It takes up a lot of your personal time, but it's all worthwhile. You probably don't realize what you're doing right now is going to pay a lot of dividends later on. And I'll give you an example. When we started off, I was on policy screening review board. And when we put together body cams, we started off with downtown bike patrol, and it has expanded. So if you get a chance, ask Officer Tester, how those body cams working, and perhaps Lieutenant Salisbury will be able to report back with you from what he knows about that. Officers that I've talked to have said nothing but good things about it. And as you can see, Springfield PD are now, out of all of the stuff they've been through, have decided that they're going to go with body cams. The only holdout with body cams right now is Portland Police Bureau. And that's political because, as I understand, there are some city commissioners who were against body cam for whatever reason, and I still don't understand what that is. But we're working on a bill based off of the policy of body cams that we did here in Eugene on body cams. And I just sent Chief Skinner an update, or sent him over a proposed policy and asked him if he provides some feedback. I'm assuming if it get a little bit too complex for the chief, he will probably give it to you on police commission, because you're the ones that's doing all of the digging down and snatching out what's good and what's bad. The legislature is pretty interesting. We have one senator, he was mentioned on local television today, Senator Dallas Hurt. For whatever reason, he has made himself irrelevant in the terms of he votes no on everything, regardless of what it is. If it's going to help his constituency, he votes no. And he claims that because the building is close to the public and you can't get people in there. Well, surprisingly, because we're doing all of these remote meetings, more people have an opportunity to participate as far away as our frontier counties and our eastern counties through this particular format that we're using. And we're looking at, they don't have to drive, so they're saving gas, they're polluting less, and they don't get to the Capitol and find out that the committee that they were looking for to do a 3-minute testimony has been canceled for the day for whatever reason. So it's a big convenience for everybody. And at moving forward, I'm looking forward to having some sense of the same thing that we're doing now, a combination, a hybrid type of committees that we're doing. As you know, when we were in the chambers, there is no exchange from the public. It's all Senate business, or if the House chamber, it's the same thing. Only in committee do we allow testimony to be given. So we are next week on the 13th. Any bills that have not been scheduled for a work session for this biennium will be done. And so that is a big deal. We're working towards a lot of different things. Now, this year, or this biennium starting off, I was voted in, and I think I may have mentioned it before, but I am the Senate President Pro Tem. So this morning or today, I had a chance to wield the big gavel on the Senate, on the dais, and pretty interesting, you know, some of the things that go on. So it's a lot of things, moving things that are going on, and a lot of bills. We have one bill that's creating a large stir at universities across the state. Senate President Courtney and myself champion a bill, Senate Bill 5. What that bill does, it compensates student athletes at the university level. In other words, we have put all of the Pac-12 on notice that here in Oregon, student athletes need to be treated fairly. And that means if they're out there working their bodies off, then they should reap some of those benefits. And we're called, so what it does is that every student, our bill says that every student, you know, because generally the star player is the one that gets all of the accolades. But imagine this, or look at it like this. You cannot have a star player if you don't have a star line, if you don't have a star supporting cast. So every athlete will share a portion of the money. That's the big difference between anything else this bill does. They're doing it in Florida, they're doing it in Texas, and there's several other states that they're doing it and putting it up. California did something a couple of years ago to benefit student athletes. On the area of public safety, a lot of the things that you're doing, I look closely at the work that you're doing, and I incorporate your work into the state. Again, the work you're doing is very relevant. Someone had mentioned pepper ball, so I'm certainly interested in what do you come up with that, you know, or you know what your findings are, you know, and how you work that out, because there is a bill on the House side that's dealing with CS gas, you know, crowd management, things like that. So that's still an issue, a topic of discussion. We'll continue to have that. What I try to do with all of my committees that I run like that, I try to make sure I have law enforcement at the table, really important, because I have to have the community members and law enforcement so that we can all sit down and come up with solutions. It doesn't work very well, I found out, if you have one side that's geared towards something and you don't listen to the other side. So I've been able to get some meaningful legislation done. One is that one of the things that I got done earlier was the banning the chokehold, not just with in police custody, but also in corrections institutions and wherever anybody is taken under custody. You'd be surprised to learn perhaps that even some of DHS, when they're going to remove children, they were putting them in handcuffs, you know, and they were grabbing them around the neck and all these, they can't do that anymore. They can't do that anymore. So we're trying to find things that's going to be a solution instead of a hindrance. I want to make sure again that all of our law enforcement go to work, perform their jobs, and then are able to go home to their families. They deserve that. But I also want to make sure that we have a good relationship with the public. EPD has been building on this for years and years. EPD is in a good place, my feelings. Uh, Not so much as some of the other departments. In particular, you know, we'll speak about some of the transitions or things that occur in Portland Police Bureau. Got some great officers up there, but they got some bad leadership too. That's sending the officers into a wrong area. For one instance, they have a female captain that was reported at some kind of function, and she doesn't like the DA, Multnomah County DA. So she was going to direct officers to go out and make massive misdemeanor arrests for anything so she can load the courts up. Uh, that's not good leadership. That's a waste of public funds. It's a waste of time. and it's not doing anybody any good because she has a personal vendetta for whatever reason. These jobs are really special, and I look at it like this: as I hold myself to the highest degree of trust and loyalty to you, I expect the same thing out of our officers as well as members of the military or anyone that holds a position of authority. So a lot of things, I don't want to go through all of the bills. I want to hear what your questions are, that I can answer your questions, because I can go on and on about things, and some of the things you probably think that, hey, I don't even know anything about this. This is not relevant to me. So why don't I open it up and take your questions?
Yeah, so if everybody wants to raise your hands as you come up with questions, to start out with, I think we are setting our work plan coming up next month. We'll be setting our new work plan for the next 2 years. Do you think there's anything that should be on top of our mind of policies that we should look at, or issue areas that we should look at that would help you in your work at the legislature?
John, great question. Here's what from my perspective, you're on the ground right now. You're doing everything. I'm looking at what you're looking at because you're looking at things that are relevant and important to the people in the community. I'm in a position where I'm looking at it from a holistic, statewide type deal, and every piece is different. Every area is different. So what I can use is your knowledge, all of the things that you go through to find solutions, and then I can work off that to compare to current statute and see if we have something comparable. And if not, I can use that as a base because you've already been tried and true. You've already practiced it.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you. I see Ian's hand.
Thanks so much, Senator. Yeah, I have 2 questions for you. The first is that I'm a relatively new commissioner, and I was wondering if you had any advice for a commissioner going into their first strategic planning session. And then also there seems to be state legislation that y'all are looking at, and then we're looking at kind of similar things. And so I was wondering if you could give any advice for how to be able to navigate this tension, because I want to be able to look at issues from, like you said, kind of a grassroots, local, on the ground level, but it also seems as if we might be looking at the same issue multiple times after y'all pass legislation or look at legislation. So maybe you could give some advice for us kind of like freshman police commissioners, how to be able to do strategic planning, and then also how to navigate that tension, because I want to be able to look at something twice in a way that benefits me as a commissioner, but also benefits the community too.
Great questions, and I really do appreciate that. Here's what I would give. I would say first, stay engaged, which you are. You're already engaged. Be open, to different perspectives, and most importantly, don't take anything personal. That is some of the things that people, especially at the state level, when you start putting self in there, you lose you lose focus about what the whole picture is. As a police commissioner in your organization, you're looking at not just the ward that you're representing, but you're looking at the thing holistically, and that includes the police officers. So I would suggest that stay engaged, don't take anything personal, be open to criticism, and be ready to provide constructive criticism. There's nothing wrong with that because you got to be able to dig and ask a lot of questions. First thing I do, anytime anyone brings me a bill or an idea, the first thing I ask them, who's against it? Because they won't tell you unless you ask. And then when you find out who's against it, then why are they against it? Have you talked to them? Because you don't want to be the person that everybody said, well, you said this, and everything goes sideways.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm not seeing another hand yet, but I've got another question as well. I've heard rumors that the legislature might be messing around with public information law in regards to specifically disciplinary action for officers, and trying to balance that in a way that's fair to employees as well as community members. is that rumor true? Do you think it's something we should, be prepared for on our next work plan coming down the line?
Okay, good questions. One, I had a bill, Senate bill, I think it's 421. It mirrors after Senator Jeff Merkley's bill. And what it does is Jeff Merkley bill at the federal level, it establishes a central depository for information on former officers that have repeatedly violated policy, uh, have a lot of bad things about them, have committed crimes, have been fired, for whatever reason. Their names will go into that database, and that will be shared nationwide so that those individuals that did that never do get hired again on any police department. It would be there. I had my bill after talk with Senator Merkley. I was going to do the same thing here, but then there's another bill that I worked on when we were in joint special session, and it's a bill which it's not 3355. I forget the number of the bill. 3145. I got so many bill numbers going through my head. So what this bill does is a combination. And the bill I was working on was going to go to DOJ, to the Attorney General's office. This bill is going for the suppository is at DPSST, where it will be maintained. One of the big myths about that is that if an officer has a violation, shoe shine, uniform, not that will be going. No, none of that. It's only for those extreme, someone that blatantly does, and only after due process. And it's determined that there are repeated instances like this. Now, bear in mind, that's only going to affect maybe 1% of the statewide officers that may be doing it, that's engaging in bad behavior. Again, 99% of all the officers that I know and that I met are doing the right thing. They're out there for the right thing. They're putting their lives on the line. And, I want to make sure that I'm looking out for them, but I also want to make sure that those bad elements that's making them look bad are removed and never get a chance to make them look bad again.
Excellent. Thank you. So I've got Alan, Bonnie, and Michael on the queue. So Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I actually two questions. One's follow up to what you just said. So part of the public records law, the discipline that chief doles out to an officer for various policy violations is, as I understand it, protected by public records law. And that's not the same as a conviction. That's just discipline. And so we never get to see that unless you're on the CRB, and then you have to keep that confidential anyway. So is the bill you're talking about address that, or is it just about the convictions and the people who get fired?
My bill, I'm looking at extreme. If a officer is late to work or whatever, that's not something that I feel we need to have in a database. We got limited capacity for storage as well. I'm talking about one where there may be someone that go out and just a string of abusing public citizens stuff, repeatedly violating extremism of the policies and things like that. The ones that should not be wearing the uniform, those are the ones that I'm looking at. There are some instances where we can look at some officers that never should have worn a uniform. I know that when I wore the uniform, I ran across a couple officers that never should have been there. One was a detective. After I left the department I was on, he was caught. He was actually stealing out the yin yang, but he was good. He was a detective. Nobody thought anything about it. And when I found out that he got busted, I was like, okay, not too surprised, but I am some shocked, that it happened like that. So there are a very few And those are the ones. And that's what my intent is for this database. They have been relieved. They have been found excessive use and stuff. I want to make sure they never, ever wear the uniform again.
So thank you for that, Senator. The second question I had is the one thing we keep bumping up against and pushing out because we want to wait for the legislature to deal with it is the chemical agents, the tear gas, use of tear gas. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what your position is on that and prognosticate a little bit with your crystal ball about what's going to happen, if anything, in the legislature this year on that.
Okay. So during the second special session, we passed House Bill 4301, the one that bans the use of chokeholds. Well, in there was a lot of stuff that was in there as well. And it also dealt with the chemical disbursements. And where we came to a consensus with law enforcement, because even OSP was saying that, hey, all the things that were going on in Portland, and and they were like, hey, look, we got to have something in order to stop this or get some kind of control. Okay, so the sideboards that we put on this was that it has to be a command authority to give the order, if that is going to be. So it had to be a centralized. But if it wasn't the chief, the mayor, or the chief, it had to be a designate of the upper echelon to do that, because we felt that, okay, well, we just can't have people just arbitrarily popping stuff off. What made things look really bad in Portland were these individuals that came in looking like 82nd Airborne, no shoulder pads, you couldn't identify who they were, and they were using rubber bullets and they were hurting a lot of people. So anything that Portland PD was doing, they owned it at that point. But a lot of those incidents was not Portland PD. It was the feds that came in, and they didn't care. And here we are. We're in this situation. So I have a uniform bill, 3355, and the design of it is to make sure that we have standard state standards in tactical uniforms. EPD is already doing it. They have their name on the tactical vest and a unique number that's identified for them on the front and back, and their agency is written on the back of the tactical vest. And if they have a helmet, then it's also on the back of it. And this was done. I had representation from EPD, Junction City. I had Portland. I had a whole bunch of Hillsborough, other areas, all at the table talking about this. And this is a consensus bill with everybody's input. And here's one of the reasons why. You can go out and buy a tactical vest that has police on the back, and it's not against the law. So when you're also looking at when the riots and stuff were breaking out up in Portland, some people were showing up looking like police officers that were not police officers. Officers don't know. You look like you got the dress on and garb and stuff, and you're doing this. I got some help here. Sure enough, invite you to the party. That's not what we want to do. And there were a number of people saying that they're there to protect the police. Well, that's fundamentally a problem.
Yeah, follow up if I may, Mr. Chair. Specifically on tear gas, we read what you did last time on tear gas and the guardrails that you were saying. Do you think there's going to be any further action on that in this session?
I know that the conversation is continuing on. Here's one of the things, my position on that. Under the Geneva Convention, use of CS gas was banned. It was banned back during World War II, although it's still used as a chemical disbursement. So looking back at the history, how do we even get here is one thing. So the conversation is not dead or anything like that. It's going, and it's going to take layers in order to get there. One is that how do we make sure that we provide safety for everybody? The public first. We're there to serve the public first. second part is to make sure that the public defenders, the officers, are also safe. So what do we do? How do we approach this? So we are still in a conversation about that. Don't know what it's going to look like, but no, it's not over.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank
I've
you.
got Bonnie, and then I've got Michael. Bonnie, you're muted.
May I go after Michael, please?
Sure.
Hi, sorry, I wasn't expecting you to go, so I had to switch gears. All right. Thank you, Senator Manning, for coming again. And I'm also newish to the police. Well, I guess I am new to the police commission. So I'm not sure where I'm not fully up to speed on all the history of the conversations. But I just wanted to follow up on one of the things that you had said about the conversation about the sunshine laws, because this is a perpetual frustration of some members of the Civilian Review Board as well, which I'm also a member of. And so in my experience as a faculty member at the University of Oregon, especially as a union officer for our faculty union at the UO, everything I've seen leads me to believe that most people who behave badly are not fired. They're usually invited to resign. They choose to spend more time with their family, or they decide to pursue other opportunities. But they usually aren't fired. There are cases where that happens, and it's usually because there's someone who just they fight the process, and so they end up getting fired at the end, and usually losing a lawsuit or two. But most people, when they're caught doing awful things, will, you know, someone like me will accompany them to discipline meetings and watch out for their interests and make sure there's due process. And somewhere along the line, they're going to get offered money to part ways. And so those people wouldn't show up on, as I understand it, on the kind of database that you're talking about. And so I think that's part of the reason for people wanting to push for. And obviously, you know, we wouldn't want to go to the extreme of, you know, administrative discipline, but certainly if there's cases where significant procedural violations have happened, or there's you know, a finding of excessive force, or you see where I'm going. There's probably some middle ground that we could capture between those people who are being fired and those people who, you know, their alarm clock breaks a lot. And how do we capture then those people and make this information available more broadly?
Okay, good point. And I didn't mention that, but if a person leave because they're pending or under investigation, that is reportable. That goes in too. So no, they don't just walk away. If there is an investigation because of repeated offenses and they're to the point like, okay, well, I'm caught, I got to get out, and they resign, that is reportable because there was a case that was opened up. And if there was not a case open up, then, you know, we need to find out why, you know, what was the cause of this, the person's record and all this other stuff come in. I believe that the system, the people that we have now that are committed to public safety will do the right thing. Inside of Senate Bill 4301, it's in state statute. It says it demands intervention, officers' intervention. If you see an officer doing something wrong, you must report it. So that is part of it. So the culture itself will take part in it. And the other piece about it is that, you know, when I was in the Army, a buddy said did something and asked me if I would help cover it up. And my response was real quick, hell no. And here's the reason. Why do you want to do something and then you want me to sacrifice my livelihood for you and there's nothing in it for me, only misery, you know? So people are looking at things a lot different, and not to mention the fact they want to do the right thing. It's just that some felt like they didn't have the protection or the sideboards and stuff that were there for them. So I think we're trending in a good way. And, you know, the incident that you said, if someone has been under investigation and they decide to fly the coop, that is reportable.
Excellent. Bonnie?
So kind of going off of that, so if they're under investigation, and I don't necessarily know that everything requires an investigation. So one of the things that we talked about in other police commission meetings is so discipline itself. Some people might be disciplined more than once, and discipline is based off of precedent. Like something that somebody did maybe previously wasn't considered bad or bad enough that it would require firing, or yeah, well, it wouldn't require firing. So I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't think that I feel like you've addressed my question, which is will it open it up for more visibility in how different officers are being disciplined? Because I think that that's really important, not only for the public, but for the officers themselves. Like, is somebody continuously running into the same issues, whether they're small or not, maybe they need help, maybe they need counseling or something, or yeah, so even like the smaller things, like that's something that in policy we might be able to address. Did I make myself clear? Sorry.
Okay, so let me ask this question. In your mind or in your position, what do you feel would be something that needs to be reportable up to DPSST?
Well, I don't know that it needs to be necessarily up to DPSST. I guess because you're saying that there's like a limited amount of like space or something in your memory.
Let me ask this question, because I think it might provide some clarity on this conversation. So currently, right now, as the police commission, we are not able to create a policy which would monitor even the lower level offenses because of state law. So I understand you're working at the state level. You don't want to, have a one size fits all solution for the entire state. But I think our community here, like Bonnie is saying, is interested in maybe getting a little bit more eyes on that disciplinary process. Is that something that would be allowable as the law that as the bills you're putting forward currently are written? Could we make local policy that was a little bit more transparent?
Well, of course, at the local level, you have that authority. What I'm talking about is that in those extreme cases, repeated violations. Say that you had an officer that had been accused of beating someone up, and that's filed. And months go later, and then they beat somebody up. Show it. Let's take him, for example. There is a record of him repeatedly doing things, and he was never disciplined until now. Those would have been something that would have been reported to under what we are trying to establish right now. That is a pattern. That is a pattern of abuse and overstepping and things like that, because it can only get worse. Now, what I'm understanding, or I think that I understand, is that you're looking at reviewing disciplinary at the local level for, I don't know what exactly, it was. I think that Michael had mentioned the police officer, that alarm goes off or don't go off and they're repeated. So are those other kinds of disciplinary issues that you're talking about? Or is it like uniform violations or things like that? Although, maybe it happened 3 months in a row or something like that. Are those are the type of disciplinary issues that you're talking about?
Bonnie, I don't want to speak for you on this, but in our previous conversation, that has not been the kind of discipline we've been as concerned about, so much as the idea, I don't know if anybody's run a red light and then taken a plea deal to driving recklessly, or some sort of lower level discipline to avoid a fight. And I think that's the kind of, somebody accuses an officer of unreasonable force, and the officer doesn't, they get off with a warning because it's not really clear whether it's unreasonable force. Keeping a record of that so that, if that happens 3 times or so, it's transparent to the public, just, off the top of my head. Bonnie, is that sort of the direction you're thinking?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like any kind of menacing or anything like that. Just like protect the menace.
So you have 3 layers here in Eugene. You have your independent police audit, you have your civilian review board, and you have your police commission. So you have a mechanism that's already in place. Portland doesn't have this mechanism. I boast about it all the time. So you already have a mechanism in place to track everything.
Yeah. I think the issue is that it's not transparent to the public.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, this was before Michael was on board, and we had Lindsay, and one of the conversations that we were having and that she said is that she has seen people go through the system, and she's not allowed to divulge who it is, but whatever discipline it is that they're getting, my understanding is that she doesn't know what the discipline is, but the point is that they keep repeating their offenses, and then on top of that, what she was seeing is that they not only continue to repeat the offenses, but they also get to what's the word when you get promoted? Oh, you get promoted. Okay, yeah. So they get promoted. So and the thing is that we're not allowed to see what it is that's going on, but it'd be really, one of the things that we discussed, it would be really great if, even if we don't get to see the officers' names, if we can track them by like a number or a letter or something and see what it is that they're violating, and they're very specifically seeing what is the discipline that is not preventing them or teaching them not to continue to do the same thing. Like, that's something that I would love to be able to see, so that the officers can learn and then not keep doing what they're doing, because we, as not me, but the the Civilian Review Board is seeing this, and it doesn't, and I can't give you the scope of like what it is that is being violated, but I am hearing the concern, and I'm just not sure that what you're saying with the extremes is something that's actually going to be affected, or is going to affect these lower level things, which might be considered lower level because, say, maybe a different precinct, if that's what they're called, doesn't have as good a chief as we do, but maybe their chief is like, well, I'm going to give you the precedent discipline, which is like, I think it's okay, but society today doesn't think that this is okay anymore, but I think this is okay, and I'm just going to give you the discipline that everybody else has received thus far. Yes.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. You're getting ready to go on to your retreat. Is that correct, Sean?
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
So this is where you're going to draw up your plan about what you want to accomplish this year. That should be, I would recommend that you include that disciplinary procedures and reporting practices as part of something that you're going to be looking into as far as policies. That way you can get a better understanding of the system, how it works, and then you can suggest or recommend changes to make sure that everything is as transparent as you would like. So you have that ability to do that right now. That's how we got done with the body cams and a host of other things. So you can do that. This is what this body is. You have a policy screening and review board, which is, when we were doing it, when I was on there, it was separate. And when the policy screen, which were members of the commission, and when we came back and we were laying it out, other members of the commission had questions that we didn't think about. So at that point, I made the motion that everybody participate doing a policy screening and review of policies, so that everybody is going to be out there, it's going to be transparent, and everybody can work together on this thing. I don't know if it's still like that right now, but I found that it worked better that way, because then you don't have people coming back and having difference of ideas about certain things. but certainly you can go ahead and say, okay, well, we want to find out what the disciplinary policies are. You want to look at those, and what's the disciplinary policy? How do we do this?
Yeah.
What's going on? What are the reporting practices? What is considered egregious versus repeated? How many times is done? You can do that. That's a part. That's within your authority.
Excellent. Yeah, it's
Don't have that authority though.
So
Under policy screen and review.
we do have the authority to review the policy, the screening review. I've got it on my list of things that go on that to bring up at our work retreat. I think the issues that union contract and employee contract and state law in regards to public information sometimes make that a really tangled road to weave through. So it sounds to me like there are no current laws which relax that for aside from your law setting up the statewide database for former officers currently.
Well, I mean, even if they're current, if they're under investigation and, it was criminal negligent, criminal intent, whatever the case may be, we've had maybe one case, a couple of cases. One, let's see, this is the one where the chief of police in he was not Lake Oswego. Yeah, I think it was Lake Oswego. He had a buddy that owned a trucking company that accused an African American man who was filing complaints of harassment on a job. So he called his buddy, the chief, and they, with some of the members of strike team and Portland police, they arrested this guy, filed egregious charges against him, and it was revealed that it was a whole scam because the chief was doing this on the behest of a friend. Now, the chief was left, and then I found out that he's at DPSST. So I want to know, why is he at DPSST when this actually happened? Well, he had been put on administrative leave with pay. I'm not satisfied with that. So I'll be doing a follow-up with that. But the thing about it is that the way it came to the legislature is because of the amount of money that there is on when you're suing. And I think that it capped off at $600,000, where when the jury had recommended millions of dollars. And even though the jury had recommended millions of dollars, in the state of Oregon, it capped at 600,000. So that's how we got involved with it. And we're still working on that to remove that cap. But the other part about that is that when you have these issues where departments are getting sued, let's look at Springfield, they're losing whopping amounts of money. And I did an interview on television, on the news, and I commented, at this pace, the city will probably go bankrupt because the citizens are paying that. That is no special slush fund that I know of that's sitting around waiting to do that. That's why good policing, and more importantly, good leadership in policing is really the key. I understand that there are some instances where we have contact with individual officers and stuff, but I think that you got a pretty good dedicated leadership in EPD. I do know of a couple of officers that were relieved, fired. I won't go into details or anything like that because misconduct, or they just shouldn't have been there. But you had some pretty good leadership that's being very proactive, and they understand this. Not every department is like this, but I do understand the need for transparency and the things, Bonnie, that you're looking at. That you have that authority to look at what you have. Those policies are there. That's why the police commission exists. The police commission exists so that you can review these policies and you can recommend improvements. You can recommend. Now, whether or not the mayor and the chief accept those are two different things. But it's your job And I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Keep pushing, because that's the only way you get the answers that you're actually looking for.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the senator? We are about out of time. I know my main ones were answered. Did I see Michael and Bonnie?
I think Bonnie was first.
No, Michael, please, you go first.
No.
We've got time for both if you go
That
quick,
one
Mike.
last-
Flip a coin.
Okay, just really quickly, this is a side note, and I meant to talk to you about this before. So we're heading into summer, and it's going to get really hot, and this is aside from the police commission. That's why I wanted to go after you, Michael. So really briefly, I just wanted to say, last year I had spoken to somebody called they're like Wildland Fire people. They're called Dustbuster Plus LLC. So I talked to them about their pay policy, and so I think it's very unfair what it is that they do.
Bonnie, I'm sorry, but if it's not about police commission stuff.
Okay, I'm going to contact you, Mr. Manning. I mean, Senator Manning, if I may, please, because it's really unfair what they were doing. So
yeah, please call me.
Yes.
I'll make sure you have his email as well. Michael and then Chantel. Did I see Chantel's hand?
Chantel can go.
Yeah, that makes sense. First round questions.
All right. I have a more general question for you, Senator Manning. I just want to know, like, how you determine which bills or policy are most important, and how do you focus and give like each one the time they need? Because I think often on the police commission, I found we table policies and come back to them because we feel as though they could be better. Like they could always be better. So how do you determine like when a bill is ready or a policy is ready to like protect the public?
Okay, good question. Thank you. When I introduce a bill, first I determine, at what level, what is the public, the concern for the public about this particular bill, and then I look at the need. How will this positively affect the people that I represent? And from that point on, if I can answer both of those, it's a high degree that this is going to be a positive impact on hundreds, thousands of Oregonians, then that becomes a priority to me. So we're fortunate at the legislature that we have a legal staff. We got lawyers all in that building who do all of the work stuff, so they do all the research and all this, and then they come back to me and said, okay, is this what you're looking for? And present me with what we call a legislative concept. So I look at the concept and see if that's good. And if I have someone, community member, say like Chantel says, hey, here's a problem, and here's why it's a problem, and I want you to write a bill for me, and you give me your problem, and we talk about it. I give that over to Leg Council. They draw up a legislative concept and give it back to me, and then I'll say, hey, Chantel, this is what I got. Is this what you're looking for? Is this going to be the solution? You tell me, yeah, then I run with it. So let me know if you come up now. It's too late right now. We're in session right now. I can't take anything. But if you have one, anybody, if you have one and you want to get it done, stuff, let's talk about it. We'll draft up something, and then when we go into the next session, then I'll introduce it.
Excellent. Thanks, James. Michael, one last question before we move on to the next.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Senator. As always, it's a pleasure to hear from you. Excellent to hear about some of the good work you're doing in the legislature for us.
Well, hey, Sean, thank you again. This is an honor. I see all my Jennifer. How you doing? Are you going to be at the? We're doing House District 13 tonight. So yeah, it's been a while. Alan, always great to see you. Officer Tester, how are you doing? We attended the same church, so I am really proud. I remember when she first got. You've been on the force what, 5 years? Wow. And
Yes,
of course, Lieutenant Salisbury. He's a liaison to everything. Good seeing you, Chuck. We'll see you again on Foundation. Yep. And everyone else, Sean, you are amazing. thank you all for what you're doing. Oh, I see the chief has joined in now. He's going to be incognito now. So I'll back out so the chief can start entertaining.
Excellent. Thanks,
Thank
Senator.
you.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Excellent. With that, we've got the Chief's report and then Pepperball after that. Chief, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I will take it away. I was being a little incognito because I'm trying to save the juice on my device because I'm mobile tonight. As you can tell, I'm in my car. There's a lot of competing interests in your community right now, both with trying to support homelessness as well as trying to support neighborhoods that are in crisis with regard to feeling unsafe around some areas out in West 7th and 13th, 14th Chambers, Washington, Jefferson Park, the Whitaker. So that's kind of the mobile nature of me tonight, trying to visit some of those spots and get a sense of what's going on. It's always good and bad when something like or a presentation like Senator Manning's ahead of me, because I hear the dialogue that you guys have and the dialogue that he has, and it kind of builds my chief's report. And I find myself wanting to interject so many times just to provide some context or to answer the question the best I can. So if there's something specifically about his presentation or some questions that you asked that you want some context around, I would be happy to try and do that. And I also heard the request from Councilor Zelenka around the CSI update, and I think what I thought I heard from him was wanting an update on potentially the listening sessions that occurred, if I'm correct.
Just a summary,
sir,
summary of what you heard, Chief. Just a summary of what you heard, what you thought you heard.
Okay, perfect. So let me start with the Chief's report with just some stuff that was on my mind before I was listening to your interaction with Senator Manning, and that's just, we're starting to approach the kind of the conclusion of the ad hoc committee, which is going to yield a litany of recommendations. One of the things that I do appreciate about the process is the amount of creativity that they went into that process, with no parameters, with no preconceived notions, with no thoughts about things that would be off the table or not valuable for us to be able to take a look at. And what that yielded was just like a volume of, I think what it's going to yield is a volume of recommendations that we're going to have to take a look at. And so just to let you know that I'm kind of thinking about what implementation looks like as we move into the summer months. And as much as you talk about your work plan and thinking about what you want to do, I am mindful of what role this body should have in building our work plan, because as they went in with no parameters, no context for what they wanted to see happen, this body is, I think, better positioned to understand how to implement policy, specifically some of the constraints around how we get to yes on some things. When you think about due process, collective bargaining act, the Oregon Collective Bargaining Act, case law, state statute, and some of those types of things. And so I'll be interested to see maybe where council discussion goes around the police commission's role as we think about EPD building their work plan around the ad hoc committee recommendations. The last I've got a draft in my inbox of the report. It's very, very rough that we're trying to fine tune before it goes to council, and it's lengthy. Just as a heads up for you two counselors, it's lengthy. I'm predicting as many as 40, 50, 60 recommendations that we'll be looking at. And I'm kind of thinking about a concept or a construct around kind of the short, medium, long-term goals with those, and what we can accomplish, and then also trying to be mindful of what some of the recommendations might do for the EPD with respect to financial commitment and or staff commitment to be able to do those, so that we can get some things done. So that's front of mind for me as we start to approach the end of the ad hoc committee's work that they're doing. The other thing that we're paying attention to, obviously, is CSI. We've had a survey that it closed last week, and that's being analyzed now. And we're trying to the city's trying to do a good job of trying to build the analytics and looking at some of the qualitative responses and trying to be able to build a good report that gives us some qualitative data as well as the quantitative data, and validating the quantitative data before we get that. And along with that was a couple of CSI listening sessions that occurred over a couple of weeks. One was in the middle of the afternoon, the other one was in the evening. Overall, the overarching theme in all of those were homelessness, or wanting to do something with homelessness with the CSI dollars. What I will say is, the first one we had about 30 people attend, and you had about 10 people speak. And so it left enough time where those 10 people got to speak 3 different times. And so you heard a lot of the same narrative there. Secondly, you had more people on there, and a very, very, what was reported to me was a very balanced crowd that, from everywhere in the community, both business community and the residential community. And again, only about 10 people spoke, and they were afforded a second round or a third round. I don't remember which one it is, many of which were the same from the first time that spoke. And so that theme was there. The second one was a little bit interesting in the sense that there was some behavior by some people that attended that I think shut down open communication by many people, which was unfortunate. There was some name calling that happened that I think had people withdraw and not want to offer their opinion for fear of being the target of some of the name calling. And so it's really unfortunate, because it was less respectful than I think what we would hope that we could sponsor as a city. And it's hard to legislate people that are there with free speech that are being engaged. And so I think that there were some really good takeaways from that, and I think there were some things that were left that it felt somewhat counterproductive in some people's mind, and so we've had to open up mechanisms for those folks that want to be heard to be able to send individual emails to council around their thoughts, or to the council listserv, and I think councilors will probably see that. So that's kind of some updates on the CSI listening sessions. From an EPD perspective, we are preparing a budget right now. We're preparing a budget that is reduced by $1.7 million, which means that I'm holding positions open. We're down 6 officer positions. I have to get to 10 officer positions unfilled as we move into the FY22 budget in July 1st of 2021. In addition to that, I have several professional staff positions open, to include at dispatch records and some other support staff, to be able to achieve a $1.7 million savings to help with a distressed general fund based on the pandemic. And so that's the construct that we're in right now. That may change with the ARP dollars, which is the American Rescue Plan dollars. We're still working on what that might look like as we build the budget, but right now I'm not making any assumptions, and we're trying to build that budget. So there will be a reduction in services over this next year as we think about entering the FY22 year. So that's we're in that budget cycle, and budget, homelessness, and crime. That's kind of the mantra right now for me as we're doing that. Couple of just a quick comments based on some dialogue that we had earlier in the meeting that might be really helpful. One was around officers that leave while under investigation, or they leave before even the investigation starts. We are required by state statute to fill out a form and send it to DPSST, where I have to check a box that articulates why an officer left. And my options are retirement, like an honorable retirement, or a resignation, even though they can't retire, they went ahead and resigned and most of that time it's to take another job, which doesn't happen often at EPD. We don't see a lot of people leaving the organization, which is good. And then the other ones that are maybe more salient to the conversation is resigned while under investigation, or terminated. And so the resigned while under investigation means somebody that resigns from the moment we're made aware of an allegation, even if we don't get to even interview our first witness, we check that box. And then what that does is it triggers at DPSST an automatic review of certification. And so they request any supporting documentation we have, or even the complaint, so that they can go through their process and see if this person should be decertified. And you may have seen recently, I've been appointed to that executive board where I will be reviewing those certifications and making decisions on who should, along with a lot of other people, quite frankly, and a very, very good, diverse, and inclusive group will be making decisions on whether these individuals should be police officers in this state. Once they're decertified by DPSST, and by the way, state of Oregon decertifies more police officers than any other state that I know of, and has this system in place, which is much more robust than most states that we've studied. Once they're decertified in the state of Oregon, very rarely, if ever, are they even eligible to be a police officer in another state when that happens. So we already kind of have a mechanism that we can build upon that helps us make sure that we're not recycling bad apples, not only in state, but also amongst other states. And that goes and we try to make sure that that goes both ways, where we're sharing that information. Another piece of information around discipline is that the Chiefs Association, which I'm the second vice president of, is in support of making sure DPSST has a depository of what we would consider conduct that would be concerning, and or conduct that results in some level of economic discipline for officers, and sending that information to DPSST so that they know that. And so we are in support of kind of where this legislation is going, and we've helped crafted or offered language that the legislature is taking into consideration. And I think we're going to get to something that makes sense. With regards to all discipline and kind of some of the comments around the CRB and what I would call kind of the concept of the frequent flyer, or the same officer, at the CRB, they don't know the names of the officers. And so if somebody from the CRB knows that it's a repeat offender, then they know from sources that maybe they shouldn't know from, quite frankly, because all of that is Officer A, B, as they review that type of stuff. But in the event that they feel like they have an officer that is a frequent flyer, one of the things that I would say is a couple of things, is that be mindful that through due process and through several of the policies that we have, and quite honestly, looking at ERB, which is the Employee Relation Board, and BULI, the Bureau on Labor and Industry, we try to adhere the best we can to a consistent approach on discipline, and where practical, it's progressive discipline to change behavior. And understand that while you might see an officer show up one day because they crashed their car because they weren't paying attention in an intersection, and they get disciplined for that, if they show up the next month around discipline, say for a really poor investigation, that progressive discipline only applies to similar types of behavior. So you wouldn't, say, give a letter of reprimand for an officer that crashes a car, and then the next month they do a really bad investigation that we're going to discipline, and we say all of a sudden, okay, Cindy's telling me CRB does know employee name and discipline. Cindy, is that right? Jump on.
CRB knows name but not discipline.
Names but not discipline. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so if we discipline somebody for crashing their car and say a letter of reprimand seems to get this employee's attention, and then the next month it's a really bad investigation, it wouldn't necessarily say, well, they apparently didn't get the memo on the or change behavior based on the memo, so now we're going to give them a day suspension. Those two things don't connect. It has to be similar types of behavior that they're not obviously getting their act together. And so just because you see the same employee's name, we need to be mindful that it has to be similar conduct that would elevate that to the point of documented counseling, written oral reprimand, written reprimand, up to suspension and or demotion and or termination as it kind of goes up. And so we try to escalate those things around corrective action. So and all of that discipline comes through me. So there is kind of it's not just a jump ball on what we think is going to happen. You know, there is some recommendations, but it does come to me. And we do lean very heavily on our HR partners at the city that are able to give us recommendations on what other similar types of behavior have received in discipline, so that we don't run afoul of being accused of disparate treatment and or targeting individuals. And so there's a lot of different decision makings that go on the discipline front. And so hopefully that's helpful. So let me stop there, because generally when we do this, there's at least a couple of questions that I can answer.
We got a couple of hands up.
So
we got a couple of hands up already. I do want to say on the discipline front, like Senator Manning pointed out, that's excellent fodder for our work plan. Looking at those policies, because we could spend all night just talking about that. Let's start with Ian and then Michael.
Thanks so much, Chief, for the report. There was a lot there. I wanted to be respectful of the commissioners who are on the ad hoc committee, and just think that it's encouraging, if and when it's appropriate, to engage with after council the report and see if there's any interface for the police commission after that. It sounds really discouraging about your planned budget cuts, but I know that there's approximately 30 million, and some of those monies from the American Rescue Plan, and some of those monies have been slated for the budget shortfalls for different departments at the city level. Really appreciate you heading to different parts of the city tonight, and don't know if it's appropriate, but would love to loop in community members who are reaching out to your department about specific areas of the Whitaker to some of the solutions that we're trying to develop for our unhoused neighbors, so we can take that energy that is kind of complaint driven to PD and put it towards some of our work towards creating temporary shelter, so we can use that momentum and kind of orient it towards some of the work we're doing in partnership with homeless service providers for WJ in particular.
One of the things that I would say, Ian, that I think would be important for the commission and the counselors to hear is that any work that EPD is going to be doing in and out this community has a direct nexus to public safety and criminal behavior. I've pulled this department hugely back from being the face of legislating homelessness. That's not our role. Our role is when we hear from neighbors and business communities that are being victimized by crime in that area. And so us being in certain areas have a direct nexus to criminal behavior and dealing with behavior only. So I just would want this group to know that.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chief, for that. That was a very, very interesting report. And especially since as a CRB representative on the committee, I'm also this discipline question I find fascinating, and also as a union officer. Like I know, so we don't on the CRB we get the names, although it's usually we just get I'm not sure what the rationale is, but some of the documents we have the names, and other documents are redacted, and so then we use the redacted documents to talk. So we'll always refer to Officer A and B and whatnot. I think that if I understand it from the committee, from the CRB members who express this frustration frequently, their concern is more about not knowing whether, so if someone does come across the committee's purview that, and it's clear that this person has been investigated for similar behavior, and we feel that we see a pattern, but we don't necessarily, we aren't the ones who determine the final, right? We're just reviewing the investigations. So there's often a sense that of frustration that we see the same person coming. We don't know if discipline is being progressive, and because we don't know if they're being disciplined, because we often don't even get reported back like what the final adjudication is. And so I think that's sort of where that frustration comes from for the most part. I'm fully I'm fully sympathetic to a lot of the complexities here. I myself have a letter of clarification in my file. They couldn't discipline me because there had been no investigation, so I managed to get a letter of clarification, right? And obviously none of this is stuff that I would want like random people to be able to look up. But the CRB is not random people, and so I think that if there would be a way, and I guess this is for Senator Manning who's not here, but if there'd be a way to carve out like not just a complete vacating of the laws to protect these files from public access, but maybe like a little opening, so that, much like with body cam footage, so that people like the CRB could at least be made aware of that aspect of what happens. And so I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I think one of the barriers that we have, right, wrong, or indifferent, one of the barriers we have is that when you finally are going to, as a CRB, when you're going to finally sit down and kind of deliberate over an investigation, and Cindy will have to chime in and she'll text me. I can't remember if we have to wait for adjudication before it goes to you, or if we wait for discipline disposition before it goes to you. But regardless of that, one of the barriers we have is the fact that your deliberations are an open public meeting, and so it has a tendency to air an officer's dirty laundry on a public scale for anybody to see. If we had a system that more limited your ability to see that as a private CRB, and much like you see details in the investigation, but as a private CRB, that seems like a discussion that's worth having, in the sense that, okay, the way the laws are set up right now around personnel records is that an individual employee's discipline is not an open public record, like when you're having your meetings, but being able to for you to see discipline as a private CRB. And so I don't know how to build that, because it seems like every time you guys get together, it's an open public meeting, right? I mean, it's you may be reviewing documents privately. You get sent a file, and on your own time you review them, you watch body cam footage, you do whatever you want. But when you're actually as a group discussing this, anybody can log in or visit when we were out of the pandemic and listen to what you have to say about that. And it has a tendency to have that openness feeling that really, really doesn't match well with the way personnel law and public records law is right now. So, I can appreciate a CRB that wants to be so good about better understanding whether there is, we're going down the right path with the type of corrective action for officers. And we've often talked about the early warning system that we're trying to enlist within our organization to make sure that we can get ahead of somebody before somebody ruins their career over bad behavior. I can appreciate that, but one of those barriers is just kind of the openness of those meetings. And to your point, airing even your corrective action or whatever you have in your file, probably wouldn't feel good for you either, for everybody to know about that. So, and I get that police are different, right? I mean, our work is work of the public, and we serve the public. And so, maybe our protections shouldn't be as robust as maybe others. And so I also understand that aspect as well.
Thank you very much for that report. Every public government official serves the public. So it makes sense to have some of those protections across the board. And I'm excited to get into that with our work plan. So next up on the agenda, we have our pepper ball policy. And I understand, Chief, that you are super busy today, so you might have to leave us a little bit earlier than we might like. tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and stick around for as much of this pepper ball thing. I was disappointed we didn't get to it last time, because I think what we tried to build is we tried to build something for you that would feel really like it's kind of hitting a sweet spot on what this particular tool should and shouldn't be used for. And so I want to stick around as long as I can.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand whenever they pop up. V?
Hi, Chief. My question is probably more philosophical.
On Pepperball. Sorry, we got to move on to the Pepperball policy, V.
Okay. In that case, Chief, I will probably give you a call.
Sorry about that. Michael, do you have one on Pepperball? Excellent. You're muted.
Yes, I was about to lower my hand because I thought when V started talking, I thought, oh no, we're still talking to the chief. But no, it is related to Pepperball. So I was reading the policy, and I have to switch back to the glasses. Looks great. I like the changes that the suggested revisions. Those are the red ones, right? I was wondering though. I'm always when I'm looking at policy documents, I always think, what is there a more efficient way to say things? And so I'm wondering, and this is partly my bias as someone who's been hit with Pepperball before. I'm wondering if between 3 and 4, B3 and B4, would it be possible to simply have a period after Pepperball projectiles will not be directed against individuals, period, and then new sentence, officers should deploy Pepperball projectiles at hard surfaces rather than individuals. You've got the should in there, so it's not saying that you can never hit someone, but my understanding is that we didn't think that this was the best way to induce pain compliance, right? There are other more painful means to get pain compliance if that's what's necessary. And if someone is trained on Pepperball, it seems to me that that's training exists for very specific kinds of conditions. And those would be conditions when you would want to be aiming at the hard surfaces rather than at the individuals anyway. And so then you wouldn't have to put in some of the other two qualifiers that I omitted. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, so to sum up the conversation from before, because I know some people have attended various meetings and missed some as well. We're talking about Pepperball specifically in the context of individual deployment versus like crowd control deployment, right?
No. Aiming at individuals rather than aiming at the ground is really where the distinction is. So it can be an individual person, and you're aiming at the ground in front of them to get some kind of deterrence, or it could be a crowd control situation where you're aiming at the ground and trying to get people to disperse. But in either case, what you would not be doing is aiming at someone to hit them with the ball in order to get pain compliance.
So as per the previous conversation we had on this, which might have been before you joined the police commission, we talked about a situation where somebody might have a knife and they were outside of taser range, and there was not the ability to deploy the taser against them. So I know in the last conversation we talked about crowd control. This policy's, I think, intended more for against individuals. So I just want to clarify for you that you are up to that speed before turning it over to Ryan to see if that is.
I just want to clarify.
Workable.
So we're in a situation where someone has a knife, and the only person who can get them to drop the knife, for example, or to stop what they're doing, is one of the few people on the force who's also trained at Pepperball and has it with them at the time, who will then use it instead of coming closer to use the taser. Is that right?
I believe that is the hypothetical that we used last time to
I can clarify some of that
illustrate
for you
this.
too. Sean.
Perfect.
I did pull some use of force, or I had Cindy pull some use of force reports for me so we could get an idea of how often this tool is used, like outside of the crowd control situation. And kind of what I expected is what showed up. We had 3 different use of forces that were pepper ball related in the last year. And all 3 of those were related to either a SWAT call out or a street crime search warrant issued. And so I reached out, and Lieutenant Salisbury's here too today to talk about, for questions that I may not be able to answer. He'd be our expert for this area. But so I reached out to our SWAT commander and just kind of asked for some details as to how it was used and what the purpose of it was. And one of the situations that it was used in was they had a person who was a very bad person, and they were concerned about safety. It was a SWAT call out, and they were in a hotel room. They tried to get into the room. The guy jumped off the balcony onto another hotel room balcony and was trying to force entry into this hotel room. And we didn't have any ideas whether or not it was occupied or not. So there was a lot of concerns for safety of other people who might be inside there. Pepper ball was deployed because they had it with them, and it was deployed at them directly. And he said it was incredibly effective to stop this person from going in. So that's why I kind of split this apart as far as looking at it from a crowd control perspective versus on the street, because only people who have it are SWAT and street crimes. Those are the only folks who are trained to use it, and the opportunities that we have to use it in are very, very small, and they've been effective when we've been using it.
Would it have been less effective if deployed against a hard surface nearby?
So that was the opinion of the SWAT commander. Yes, he felt like it would be less effective because it was one of those situations where this was an immediate concern for the safety and welfare of another individual inside the apartment. And one thing you have to understand, if we have the SWAT team out on a operation, there's a matrix that it goes through. So they have to meet a certain level. Like this person, somebody who we're very concerned about, who could injure the public, who could hurt people, kill people, those kinds of things. So it's a much more elevated call than it would be just for patrol.
Could we split the difference here and say prior to deployment against individuals, it should be attempted against hard surfaces when possible? Would that satisfy what you're saying, Michael?
Actually, what would here's the thing. So in number 4, we say it should be used against hard surfaces in reduced visibility situations. That makes sense. In number 3, it says it shouldn't be used against individuals for the purposes of crowd control. So I guess what I'm wondering is in reduced visibility situations, i.e. gas masks, necessary, or would it be sufficient to say officers should, leaving that option in the should there, officers should deploy pepper ball projectiles at hard surfaces rather than individuals? And then if we want to add unless absolutely necessary or whatever there. But it seems to me that the implication to me reading B4 is that officers are using this, are targeting people unless it's reduced visibility.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, Lieutenant Salisbury, but is that because of efficacy of deployment as well as the inability to avoid head, neck, and groin regions as outlined later in the policy?
Actually, if you don't mind, Lieutenant, I'll answer that question, because one of the things that I hadn't had an opportunity to tell you guys about was that there were recommendations came out of the CRB by the auditor, and that was one of the recommendations specifically as it's worded, that there was a concern about pepper balls and the how accurate they would be when you're wearing gas masks and those of such. So I wanted to capture that directly as it came from the auditor's office as a recommendation for a policy change. I'm happy to make some changes on that. I did bounce that off of Leah Pitcher, and she was comfortable with that verbiage. But if you guys are interested in looking at that differently, feel free to have that conversation.
That makes sense to me now that you say that. And I'd forgotten how policy is written by so many different people giving input. That makes total sense to me now why it's written that way. Yeah, let me think about it more.
Yeah, I still like the idea of deploying it against a hard surface before deploying it against an individual, if possible. I know it's not always possible. But do we have any other questions or concerns with the policy as written? Bonnie?
First, just a question of clarification. I was reading an article by, I think it was KVAL, and they were saying that that not only pepper balls were used on a reporter, but also something called a foam baton. And just real quickly, is there a policy for foam baton? Because I don't remember seeing that. Is there a policy for foam baton? It looks like you're saying yes, Chief.
It might be. Go ahead, Chief.
Ryan can talk about this, but the foam baton is part of the 40 millimeter deployment. It's deployed by that delivery mechanism. It's just a different type of munition that comes out of the 40 millimeter. So you would find that probably within the 40 millimeter policy.
Okay, I'm done with that then. Thank you. Okay, and then my other question is, so this policy doesn't clarify or state anywhere that I can see the difference between live and live X. So my understanding is both can be deployed, and I don't understand how it is how you select which one is deployed. So one of them seems to be a lot more powerful in the sense of, I guess, how it makes you cry or tear up. And I just guess I'm wondering how do you select that?
You want me to answer that, Ryan, or do you want?
Just trying to unmute. If you would not mind, I would love it if you'd answer that.
Absolutely. So in a crowd control situation, you're right, Bonnie, that there is a difference between live and live X, and live is 0.05% active OC ingredient, powder ingredient within that pepper ball mechanism delivery system. And then the live X is 5%. So it's basically 10 times hotter than what the live is. During a crowd control situation, we can use a combination of all that, and that's based upon the given situation. Typically, if we are dispersing that in a crowd control situation, we're actively seeking to, obviously, like Sean had mentioned, his preference is us engaging the ground first in front of a crowd for an aerial denial or an effective arrest, or in the defense of ourselves or another person. So it's a combination of that mixed in, and in our delivery mechanisms that we use, which is the pepper ball delivery system itself. Then we also have inert mixed in there as well too. Inert could be used when you don't want to deliver the basically active ingredient that's in live or live X, and it would deliver the same effect upon a crowd via seeing the device being deployed, and then also seeing the powder that would come up that would be a deterrent to somebody to go away or to leave the area, if that makes sense. And to reiterate more, as far as the choice, as far as who decides when that gets deployed, it's the individual officer that's certified to carry that mechanism during a given situation, whether that be on patrol, whether it be in a crowd control situation, or with SWAT. Those are all certified officers that have been given the training to make that choice and to deploy those mechanisms within the given environment that they're at.
Chuck, what would be some factors that you would, as a commander out on scene, or what would be some factors that would make you decide to do the higher level of OC delivery versus the lower level of OC? Or is it just indiscriminate that they're all mixed together and we're doing that?
Well, typically, in the beginning, it's been a long time since we've actually have deployed pepper ball systems in a crowd control situation. And I think if I recall correctly, that occurred only in the first 3 or 4 days of the incidents, going back to May 29th when that riot started to occur. And those instances, we had a certain amount of inert, we had a certain amount of live, and a certain amount of live X. And we, at that particular time, because we were limited of what we had, and we had a large scale event occurring and continuing on for multiple days, it was all mixed at that time. And to go back and answer Chief's question in regards to when you would maybe use a live X versus a live would be, you know, a situation that you have a barricaded subject in a house, or in a crowd control dispersal situation when you have somebody that might be throwing rocks at officers, bottles, actively engaging our officers on the line where they're attempting to assault them, throwing sticks, throwing bottles, throwing rocks, etc., like that.
I see V's hand. Are you muted, V?
Hi. I know that, you know, pepper can be extremely detrimental to folks who are asthmatic, and I have asthma, so a little sympathetic for folks who might encounter if they're at a protest and a pepper ball were to be dispersed. Is there some kind of first aid kit available, or do you have paramedics readily available to help these folks if they encounter, you know, a situation, medical situation where they might need immediate attention?
Absolutely. Nice to see you, V, by the way. I met V the first time the other day in another meeting. So
yeah.
yes, so we do have medics on standby. Officers are trained in the basic first aid. What best helps out in a OC, whether that's via the spray, via pepper ball delivery mechanism, or with CS gas or something like that, the best thing is time, air, and water. That helps that. And so if we have control over that person, like if we were to use it in an infected arrest and they were exposed to the OC vapor, or somebody that was in need of a care, then yes, we would work to get that. The line officers, the supervisors on scene, we would hold the line and we would work to render that first aid at that particular time, by whatever means, whether that's us doing that ourselves. We do carry water with us in our vehicles. We have the ability to pull in medical staff at that point in time via the fire department or paramedics to render that aid and get that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
And V, that's also addressed in D2 of that policy too. If anybody even says they need any medical attention, we're to immediately summon medics to assist.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions, concerns? Michael, have you thought more about your comments earlier? I don't want to.
I think I'm good.
Okay. Bonnie? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yes. Under policy 804, it says that the use of projectiles against an individual is a reportable use of force under department policies on use of force through blue team. Reportable does not mean necessary, but that's such an action can be taken. Is there a reason that it's worded that way?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So that just, if you refer back to our reportable use of force policy, it talks about everything that has to happen on that. So the term reportable use of force is just to direct somebody into that. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So anything that's a reportable use of force has to follow that procedure in that policy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
I ran into the same thing the first time I saw the reportable term, where it really means you have to report this. Yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
And then, so somebody emailed me and they were asking me about A1 and 2. So it says the department has adopted a less lethal force philosophy to assist in the de-escalation of potentially violent situations. And then it says the less lethal force philosophy shall not preclude the use of non-lethal and or deadly force. And I know that I had read that and I had been confused and I just kind of glossed over it because I was like, I'm going to move on. Okay. But this person was essentially pointing out that it's kind of, in a way, it kind of contradicts itself or kind of eliminates the point of the other. So 2 eliminates 1. Does that make sense? Like, can you clarify what this means? Like it, because it says adopted a less lethal force philosophy to assist in
Yeah.
de-escalation, but then you can still use lethal force. Can you just, I guess I'm trying to still understand it.
The way I read that is that even though we have this philosophy of de-escalation, this philosophy of less lethal force, it doesn't mean we won't resort to non-lethal force or deadly force if necessary. So adding when necessary might clarify that a little bit to two.
That would make it a little better, I would suppose. Just it does seem. Is anybody seeing what I think I'm seeing? I guess I feel conflicted.
It certainly undercuts and undermines the first, like two certainly undermines one in appearance, and you know, in the way it's worded.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so something to think about.
So like, I think, Sean, I think what you were saying is exactly what we're trying to accomplish here, is that, you know, our goal is for de-escalation and for less lethal force. I mean, that's what we want to accomplish. But, you know, as we all know, things can change at any second. And, you know, we may be de-escalating and somebody all of a sudden produces a gun and points it. So that could quickly change from de-escalation, less lethal force, to now we're in a position where we absolutely have to use an elevated use of force to make this scene safe. So I hear what you're saying, Bonnie. I totally get the idea behind it. I understand what your words are there for, but we can't ever like put somebody in one corner and say you have to stay there no matter what happens, because we're dealing with people and we're dealing with their actions. We don't know necessarily what they're going to do. So we have to have all of those options available. While at the same time, we want to stress the fact that de-escalation and less lethal is definitely our first choice, which is why you see that up towards the top as well.
So then is this saying that you can use, because this is the pepper ball policy, so is it saying that you can use the pepper ball launchers with deadly force? Is that what it's implying then?
I don't know that it's implying that directly. No, I think it's at some point in time. So deadly force, and I know most people think of deadly force as like you're using a gun in the police officer's perspective, right? They have a gun. But if there's a position or a situation where deadly force is necessary to protect another officer or protect the public, really any tool could be used to accomplish that. And so I think that I see your point, and then talking about it specifically about pepper ball. But the other piece is that, for example, I mean, if there was a situation where an officer was getting shot at and another officer was driving in, they could use their car to cause deadly force to a suspect if they were getting shot at or other people were getting shot at. So we don't want to preclude anything from that use if it's needed, but we want to make sure that our goal here is that's our last resort. That's not what we want to accomplish. We want to de-escalate when we also want to use less lethal force in the first place. Does that help clarify, Bonnie?
So I think it kind of does. But so are you saying that, so my understanding is that pepper ball generally is less lethal but can it cause death? It can cause death. Okay.
Pretty much anything can cause death if you hit something hard enough with it.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, please do.
Or Ryan, so if you read section C, usage procedure under number 1, I think that addresses what I think Bonnie's talking about. Although classified, and I'll just read it out loud, although classified as a less lethal device, the potential exists, as with any mechanism that we deploy in law enforcement, for pepper ball projectiles to inflict significant injury when they strike the face, eyes, neck, and groin. Therefore, that's why those are not our primary strike areas when we're deploying the devices. Therefore, avoid intentionally striking those body areas unless justification for the use of deadly force exists. Is that what you're talking about, Bonnie?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I have a few more questions, but I want to allow others.
Would an example help clarify that I can think of off the top of my head, or not? Or would it
that would be lovely. Yes.
So an example would be if an officer is deploying a pepper ball gun in a situation, and if the person that officer is addressing all of a sudden pulled a gun, and the officer can't transition to his, deadly force options, and he or she was able to deploy that mechanism by striking the face, the eyes, and stop that immediate threat, that life-threatening action against another person or that officer, that's where that would be justified in doing so, using a typical less than lethal device.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions before we jump back to Bonnie? If you do at any point, please raise your hand. Until then, Bonnie, go ahead.
Okay. My other question is, oh yeah, so given that in May, you have, at the EPD, you have a supply of Live and LiveX, and the power difference between them is 10 times. I guess my question is, do we or should we be concerned with having something in the policy that addresses that difference? I understand again that they were all deployed before, and before I was going to ask for information as to what was deployed and why, but then it was all deployed. So, but I guess those were less than usual circumstances, and I wonder what in the usual circumstances would we need a policy? Because there is a difference, and I'm sure that they made a difference for a reason, and I guess it would just be nice to maybe address that in the policy. Do you think that that's necessary?
I think speaking, I wish Naivasha was still here. Including it in the policy might be confusing to people who read the policy, and we're not going to be able to update the policy as readily as the Department of Standards and Training can update their training on the use of such ammunition. So I'm a little bit wary about codifying it in policy.
Okay.
But you're right, it is an area of concern. If either of you can talk a little bit about the Department of Standards and Training and how they train us on those two ammunitions, what circumstances?
So typically our training comes from like representatives of the company itself. That's where we get our certifications through. So Pepperball provides that too. We have currently we have one individual that's assigned to the SWAT team that's a certified instructor that provides that instruction to those who we authorize from command staff level to be certified and deploy that mechanism. And we limit that who that is. It's got to be an individual who's dedicated and you know has a good track record and somebody who has the competency that is proven track record to be able to deploy that mechanism in those environments. So as I think it was Ryan that alluded to it earlier, currently there is just a few patrol officers that are certified to use that, as well as street crimes, as well as our SWAT, some of our, and not everybody, and some of our SWAT members on that team. So.
And it's up to their discretion to choose. My understanding is they each individual is allowed to choose Live or LiveX.
I can tell you from an incident commander's perspective. So typically my job or my role as an incident commander, when I go into these field force environments or protest events and stuff like that, I can dictate that as well. And previously, a lot of the reasons that we used a combination of all three was just availability. There's limited supply. The whole nation is there's an experienced shortage, and there's a difference in price on all those. And so we really didn't have a choice but to make them last by mixing them and having that option available to us, be able to have sufficient supplies to be able to address the issues that we were facing at that particular time.
Okay, I guess I'll just say what my concern is and be open about that. So I guess my concern was like, and I'm really glad to hear, obviously, and I wasn't suspecting it, but anyway, the point is my concern was that maybe with Black Lives Matter, it would be the LiveX that was deployed, but then if like Proud Boys came along, it would just be Live, or even Inert that would be deployed. So I guess that's just where my concern was, but it kind of sounds like
it has been the same and consistent the entire time. We've deployed the same way with all three involved in it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that would also go to the crowd control policy where we talk about impartiality. And so if such a situation did occur, it would violate a different policy in a different way, but it would be a violation.
And I will, I'll add something to that and be frank, just like Bonnie is, as far as, in a crowd control situation, I don't need a full hopper of live or live X. It doesn't make sense to me as an incident commander to have that type of deployment in that. What's practical and what works best in the same result is achieved, which is the compliance from whatever we're trying to gain compliance from the person we're engaging, or whether that's one individual or whether that's multiple individuals at a time, is to disperse and leave the area, whether that's, unless there's a direct threat to us or somebody else, when we're typically going to make an arrest or we're going to move a crowd or get somebody out of a specific area. So.
Okay. I have a final thing, and that is all.
By all means.
Okay, so final thing, and this is sort of kind of out of left field or across the pond, so they say in certain places. So in the United Kingdom, as we understand it, I guess their citizens are not allowed to have guns. And I understand here in the United States, we are allowed to. So obviously there's a lot more guns. And so officer safety is obviously a big concern because we have people that are walking around with guns. My other understanding is that in the United Kingdom, they are any new officer is not allowed to have a gun. But once they get into sergeant, they may put in a special request for a gun and have to specially say, what is it in their work that makes it so they need a gun? And so I've been thinking, as the chief says, we have baby officers. He calls them baby officers. And because they're new. And I guess that I've been thinking is, well, I don't feel like you would give a baby officer a gun. But granted, they are in situations that are dangerous. And yeah. I guess what I've been thinking is like, what are the possibilities of maybe saying that a similar system is possibly used here? I don't know how many people walk around with guns and how often you encounter guns, but I guess I wonder if a baby officer can be given a pepper ball machine, because as I believe you said earlier, SWAT used it quite effectively on this one person on that balcony. And I guess I just wonder if maybe baby officers can eventually graduate to a full gun when they are sergeants, if they put in a special request. And that is what I'm wondering and thinking about.
Yeah. So to lay the groundwork a little bit here, it sounds like you want to examine both the firearms policy, which would have to go on our next work plan, as well as the mandatory training for the pepper ball stuff, and why only some of the officers are trained on pepper ball, even if it's been proven an effective deterrent before. Is that...
Kind of, yeah. So yeah, essentially well, it's not so much about just like having people trained on them, although that would probably help. But I think, and I am not an officer, and you all know this better than I do, what it is that you encounter. But I wonder if having a pepper ball launcher might not kind of maybe prevent officers from maybe having that fear of like, oh, I just shot somebody, or maybe they shot somebody and maybe they felt like, oh, I shouldn't have shot that person, but maybe they shot him with a pepper ball machine. And that might, I don't know, I feel like that might help them and also kind of help them practice de-escalation, because they don't have the gun that they like automatically go to.
So it sounds like your main concern is the gun policy then, and that would be off topic for talking about this policy.
I would like to use a pepper ball though as a replacement. So. Yeah,
so talking about the pepper ball policy, if this were to be as ubiquitous as firearms, we would need all of our officers trained on it. So what is holding us back from training all the officers on pepper ball?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. So what you were saying. That is all. Thank you.
Is there, I don't know whether this would be for Ryan or Chuck, but is it just availability of that trainer?
So I just want to make sure there's a lot of stuff said there. I just want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm asking. Can you repeat the question for me, Sean?
First question, we'll probably have to tackle the second half of this with our next work plan. But the first half of that question is, why isn't every officer trained with pepper ball?
Actually, I will defer that to Chuck. I can answer part of her earlier question though, as far as like, or clarify, I should say. So to get on a special team, you have to be off probation, you have to have good standing, you have to have, and you have to go through an actual process. And so currently, like Lieutenant Salisbury said, the pepperball guns that we have now are all given to people who are on those special teams. So they're typically your more senior officers that get that, or have additional training or significantly more training to be on those special teams as well. So I'll hit that piece. And Lieutenant, if you don't mind.
Yeah, but to Bonnie's point, it makes more sense for the actual deadly firearm weapon to require special training as opposed to a pepper ball hopper. So
there is a huge amount of training that takes place. Well, for one, when someone's first hired, there's a week's worth of training up at Department of Public and Safety Standards for firearms, and there's also additional training that happens within our department, and then there's ongoing training, and there's qualifications every 6 months, as well as additional ongoing trainings that we go to on a regular basis as it relates to firearms. So there is more training in firearms than there are on pepper ball by far.
And I think, to be fair to the agenda, really, we'll have to tackle the gun side of it next time, but just focusing on not next time, but in our next work plan. But just tackling the pepper ball side of it, what's holding us back from having more officers trained on it?
Lieutenant, I'll let you.
I can answer that. It simply comes down to the fact that availability of the munitions for one, and then also the which is the pepper ball itself, and then also the delivery systems. And I have only a few of those, so it would not be practical to get everybody certified. So if I focus on a few people on our crowd control team, or on a SWAT team, or on street crimes team, it's easier, more practical to continue that training and maintain that with limited resources and limited funding to be able to provide that.
Are there any plans to expand the availability in the near future?
Not, yes, to a certain extent, but not like department wide.
Not as ubiquity.
Yeah, not all 200 something officers that we have, or as far as all of our sworn officers and stuff like that. So eventually, we could potentially look at adding additional mechanism or delivery pepper ball delivery systems for like a crowd control team, and because there's very few on SWAT, and there's very few on and street crimes are the ones that actually have those now. We just borrow those personnel when we go into a crowd control situation this time.
Is that something that we can put in our agenda for the I guess I'm just basing off what Senator Manning was saying, where it's just like, maybe if we wrote something, then we could propose it, and then maybe that could be something that maybe could be considered for future funding.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Part of, this is me not speaking as chair. This is me just editorializing. But part of the problem with these massive systems is, even if we decided we wanted, like, even if the entire department decided that we wanted to switch out our firearms for pepper balls tomorrow, the requisitions, the equipment side of it wouldn't make it practical, and that transition would be a massive undertaking, even assuming everybody was on board with such a change. I'm not hearing it from the majority of the community, but part of our job as commissioners isn't just to follow community sentiment, it's to lead the way on some of these policy changes like Senator Manning was talking about. I agree, I wish it was faster sometimes, but I think working in something on our work plan and discussing that next month is going to have to be a first step to prove some of the viability of some ideas like these. if that answers the question at all, or if I was just ranting.
Yes. I motion that we put that on the agenda, if that's a thing.
Cool. So I will write that down. No motion necessary because it's already on the agenda for next time. But I'll write that down as an idea that we need to discuss. Cool. And any final questions on this before we move to the next agenda item, or any final additions or corrections to this, or can we put this to rest? Alan?
I had a question about medical personnel or medical aid. The policy says that if we use these, then if medical problems are observed, this is in D2, any medical problems observed, if the person requests medical assistance, immediately summon medical aid. So what does that mean? Is that we don't, if we're going to deploy pepper balls, do we require on-site medical assistance before we do that, or is it just summon it after?
No,
Because we don't necessarily know when we're going to deploy them.
Councilor Zelenka, it would be after an incident or a deployment that we would summon that medical attention to the scene where we're at, where we have that person in custody at, or whoever we're administering that aid to.
So that would be calling EMTs or whoever.
Correct.
And it wouldn't be administered by police officers.
No, we could administer it as well ourselves. Because are you talking about you're just talking about pepper ball deployment, correct?
Yeah.
Or OC spray that all the officers are issued and carried and stuff like that. So yeah, so typically in those particular scenes, if we have control, because there's been instances where, you know, they would go running off into the crowd and we wouldn't have access to them. So unless they are requesting that aid of us, or we have that person in custody, we would likely remove them from that scene fairly quickly, administer the aid that we could via water, air, all that kind of stuff that I talked to you about. Time, air, and water helps in those. That's the first aid remedy for dealing. That's what the medics come and do for us. We would remove them from that scene to allow the crowd control team to continue doing their mission at that particular time. And they would go off with a couple officers and either meet some location or summon the medics to that location if it required extensive things, or if it needed to go further. Let's say be brought up an instance where somebody might have asthma or something, and we have a more severe reaction to the chemicals within the devices that we deploy, then obviously we would definitely get medics, and then it could potentially escalate from there if we needed to get them to the hospital or what have you. But we would be the first, just like in any instance when we responded officers, we would be that first administration of aid, whatever that may be, to help remedy the situation in the particular line. Then summon additional medical aid via medics and stuff like that, and go from there based upon their recommendation.
So how much training do officers have in medical aid?
Anytime we deploy, we're provided basic first aid, just like as we're required to by DPSST. In addition to that, when we do, and I'm going to throw a couple different things out there. So whether we're deploying OC or taser, or pepper balls, or deploy a 40mm sponge round in an instance, with that training that officers receive, part of that is the medical aid to address those issues. And so all the officers that are certified in those things get additional training on top of first aid and practice that in scenarios, administering first aid and going through those policies and procedures to be able to summon medics and get the additional help that's needed to address the person that we're dealing with at the time.
Yeah, so like these concern if someone had asthma and they and then started to react to it.
Right. So in an incident,
police officers are trained
that
to
would
deal
be
with
that, to me, or to any of my officers on the scene, that would be an emergency situation. We would stop what we're doing. We would protect this area. We would get medics summoned. It would be a code 3 request, because anybody that has respiratory distress, medics are going to respond code 3 to that. They would get there, they would do their evaluation, and start administering whatever aid that they need to do from, like I said, the air, the water, administering oxygen, all that kind of stuff. We don't have oxygen, but we can do things up to that till medics arrive and help mitigate that as best as we can.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant.
I've got Chantel and V, and then I'm going to have to cut it off there to stick with time.
Just to on that same like topic, I would think that it would be really difficult to help someone who like the police just shot with like a pepper ball. Like I can imagine if that was me, I wouldn't want immediate aid from the people who just shot at me. So I think that's like maybe what Alan was getting at, like summoning medical aid before deployment. So like these people are already on standby.
Yeah, I guess that only works if you know you're going to deploy it, which is probably not the most of the cases.
Our goal is, honestly, our goal is not to deploy it if we don't have to. And those things, unfortunately, they pop up in an instant, and we can plan and prepare for that. And depending on the situation, the intel that we're getting, and I'll give an example of if we're in, if we have a known protest, we do an operations plan, and we know that there's going to be armed people there, and there's threats of violence in the community or something like that. I might, as an incident commander for field force, put medics on standby. I've done that several different times where they're not going to be right there in the middle of it, but they are going to be on standby in close proximity. So we have a dedicated medical personnel to our event that's going on. SWAT does that. Street Crimes does that for search warrants and all that stuff. And we do the same thing in a field force environment based upon the intel that we're going into. We don't always do it. It doesn't dictate the need to do that. But we don't know when we're going to engage, if we have the intel that there's a high likelihood of unrest or, potential criminal activity, and it's a guessing game. And we do our best to try to prepare for that leading up to a given event. So,
were the riots that occurred back in May, did you have medical people there on site or in the background?
We had medical people that were at my incident command staff, yeah, and ready to deploy out. And that was that was the first night, and I think the second night.
Okay, thank you.
V, I've got your final comments before we move to approval.
Yeah, I think the lieutenant kind of addressed my question in a way. I guess when I said asthma, I left out anaphylaxis. People are allergic to different things. You have people who were in the crowd, or maybe just observers who were not even in the crowd, and you have a gush of wind, and suddenly they're in anaphylactic shock. That's why I think it's important to consider having medics available, especially if you have intel on the crowd, and that you're going to use the pepper ball, excuse me, then I think it'll be good to consider having medics around for that to mitigate that. The last thing we want is somebody dying of suffocation, anaphylaxis, and then that's a huge the stress on the family, on the community, and also you're looking at lawsuits, right? That can happen. So anyway, just that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your feedback, V. During this discussion, I haven't heard any significant changes to the proposed wordings of this policy. I would still like to see when necessary added to A2 to clarify as per Bonnie's pointing out the seeming contradictions there. But other than that, I haven't heard anything substantive to change. Even that's kind of nitpicky.
If we did that, can we just do that? Is that harmful in any way to just do that?
No, that's what I'm saying is we should do that.
How do I
motion? Pushing for a motion, Sean?
Yes. So I would accept a motion to add when necessary to A2 and to pass the.
Where in A2?
At the very end.
So comma as necessary.
When necessary.
Did I do that? When?
Yes.
Okay. I motion that we add when necessary to A2 at the very end of the sentence.
Sweet. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I saw V's hand first. Everybody in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thanks, Macy. And anybody opposed, say no. Seeing none, that's passed unanimously. Other than that, I would now accept a motion to you take this policy up to chief for approval.
There you go, Michael. Go ahead.
I'm still in. I'm fine. I'm not going to belabor this anymore. But I just feel that I wish there was a way to specify that this should not be aimed at people. But I think the spirit is clearly there in the writing that's there. So I'm fine moving forward, but I'm not going to be the one who
motions. Yeah, that makes sense. Alan, was that you offering to make the motion?
I was offering Michael to make the motion.
Oh, okay.
I declined the offer.
Well, if nobody wants to make the motion, then it's not going to happen.
I will move to move this forward to the chief.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do I have a second?
As amended, right?
As amended,
second.
Yes.
As amended.
Thanks, Alan. Everybody in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Anybody opposed, say nay or I guess raise your hand. Seeing none, I thought I saw everybody raise their hand. Seeing none, this will move forward to chief for final approval. Thank you all for your hard work and for your diligent questioning. Next up on the agenda is a little bit of retreat information. So in the next packet before the retreat, you will get a bunch of information about how retreats have worked in the past. Obviously, this year's a little bit different. This year, the way I plan on doing it is spending the first 20 or so minutes talking about all the ideas that I've heard in the last 6 months from all of you, bringing those up, proposing those first to put them in a Google Sheet or on a whiteboard that Jeremy will erect and have a camera on, depending on visibility for that. I'll test that out with him between this meeting and the next. But having it publicly accessible to everybody, either in a shared screen or in a video camera. So we'll write all these ideas down on the on some publicly visible method, and then unfortunately, we're going to have to go around individually and each propose additional ideas. Normally, it's a little bit more collaborative, a little bit less formal. It's more of a conversation. I want to make sure everybody's voices are heard, and I haven't seen a good way to do that without just taking turns. So if you guys could come prepared for the retreat with a few ideas, you'll get a chance to talk about them, tell us why you want to look at them, if there's any specific thing about them that you want to look at, if you have any ideas on a specific person who you think would be a good person to reach out to. The same way we had Senator Manning join us for a legislative update this time. If you have, we have a lot of access to officers, obviously, but if you have an outside perspective that you also feel needs to be heard, that will help inform us going forward. Alan, do you have a question?
No, I was going to comment on your request for bringing stuff to the table. There are several software pieces, and some of them are internet based, where like they're basically giant whiteboards which multiple people can be on at the same time, put little sticky pads up. So it's basically doing exactly what you do in a person-to-person retreat, where everybody's working in the same space at the same time, and then you kind of say, okay, let's look at what we did. And I think the city has access to some of those, if not they can easily get those things. So that would be really helpful, and I think in a retreat setting.
Yeah, one of the
I've
things I
used them
want
and they
to
work.
one of the things I want to make sure is that it's transparent who's talking. The ones I've seen before have been really confusing about who's writing what down.
You
and I
can
don't
make them
want
so that they have little initials in them or an icon, depending, that's assigned to people, so that it's clear who said what.
Excellent. Let me, before I get to questions, I see 2 hands up. You'll get 5 to 10 minutes to talk about your ideas, why you want it on the work plan, to take and answer questions. And at the very end, probably in the last half an hour or so, we will actually vote on which ones we want to put on the work plan to take to city council. So I saw Michael's hand first and then Ian's.
I think Ian was first, actually,
Um,
by a smidge.
Okay, we'll go Ian and then Michael.
You're a gentleman and a scholar, Michael. I have 3 questions, Sean. I was wondering if we could do any of this work asynchronously before the retreat, send you some of our thoughts regarding things that we want to be able to bring up. And if there was any way for us to be able to see kind of aggregated how we're all thinking, so that we can kind of be informed, like, oh, this is, what other folks are thinking about, and maybe spark some of our own thoughts. And then 2, I was wondering what's the best place for us to look at previous kind of outputs from strategic planning retreats, looking at the previous strategic plans themselves. That'd be really useful for me. And then the last 2, I've been kind of reticent to like toe step on this, but I was wondering if either you or the council members could sunshine kind of what the ad hoc group's processes and our potential intersection, because I feel I do not want to overstep bounds here, but it seems as if the chief was alluding to a report going to council and then perhaps council deliberating on if this goes to us. And there seems potential here to discuss that, but I apologize if I'm overstepping.
By all means, let me answer in order. So there is possibility of asynchronous work and sending it to me and Jeremy sending that work out via email to everyone. However, I want to make sure that this conversation is transparent to the public. So I think it's a good way to lay the foundation to let us, if you have a complicated or nuanced proposal, to let us read that before the meeting, so you're not spending time explaining it. But at the same time, I want the public to be able to understand why we prioritize something and not have any of this work occur in the dark, which I know you're fully aware of why those public meetings laws are there. So yes, it's possible. I'm not willing to stake my hat on that particular idea. As far as former retreats are concerned, Jeremy was going to be sending out a video of our last retreat and how that went. If you want more than that, I don't know the best way to get that. Jeremy, do you have a?
So, Ian, are you interested in particularly just seeing the past reports, or do you want to watch the videos? Like, the last video is posted right now on the Police Commission webpage. You can go back to May in 2019 and watch it. So that's available at any time. And
Is that on Netflix?
No,
YouTube, actually.
Didn't make the cut.
It's on the Police Commission webpage. So if you just go back to our agendas and materials, you can watch the video in May 2019. As far as the individual reports, if you want me to send a couple of those, I can, just so you can see what the previous ones look like. But those are actually out there as well, from where the Police Commission, generally the following meeting, the report comes to the Police Commission in June for them to review before it gets that final, okay from the Police Commission to be moved on to council. So it's right there as well. And of course, there's the copy at the council level. So they're all out there, but if it's just easier for me to send you a couple of reports, the last couple of reports, I'm happy to do that as well. So.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I think the last strategic plan that's informed our work plan was in the orientation packet, and I read that. And I think maybe seeing another one would just kind of help ground me and be like, okay, this is what the thinking was during this time, and then maybe this is how it was informed for this year. So yeah.
And this year's been
The
weird.
last two then maybe? Last
Sure.
two biennial?
That sounds great.
Okay.
As far
Sean, in our planning, I think we discussed about, having folks come with a few ideas, not just one, because because then, if somebody else already, took up the idea, you at least have some backup ideas, to suggest.
And it's not mandatory that you come with an idea. You can just come and judge all of our ideas if you want. That's what I did last time around. I was new on the commission myself, so I didn't have my feet under me yet. But to answer your third question, and Alan or Jennifer might be able to add more to this, but yes, the ad hoc committee will report to City Council. And in the last meeting with City Council to report to them, there was a number of questions from city councilors that also gave me the impression that they might send some of these policies our way to review. I think leaving space for that on our work plan is one of the proposals that I will make and ask you all to support, to make sure that none of the good ideas generated by the ad hoc committee get lost or fall through the cracks. Jennifer, do you have word on whether you can get their written report to us before the work plan meeting? Because I know we talked about that last meeting.
Before it comes public to council. Well, they're still working on it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know about that.
Yeah. If possible, that would be lovely. If not, it's completely understandable, and we'll treat it as emerging issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would be helpful though, because it's not like council's going to be like making all the decisions at the first meeting, right? It's more of a. So I think there's going to be plenty of time, and I think the way you answered the question was very good. There will perhaps be something that gets sent. There will perhaps not, but leaving space open is probably a good idea.
Cool. Excellent.
And there'll be a lot of review by the council in all these. I mean, like the chief said, it's got like 60 things in it, so it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Excellent.
Sean, have we determined the time of when this is going to happen? I know that we picked out a date, right? You did a doodle, Jeremy, and
I believe Saturday afternoon, next Saturday afternoon, 1 to 5. No, noon to 5. Via the doodle.
That's April. Are you talking about May or April?
April. No, I'm talking about May 8th. No, May 15th. Sorry. May 15th. I cannot remember the exact times.
Jeremy?
Yeah, the date is on the, for clarification, the upcoming meeting date, the May retreat date is on the front of your packet. So that first page, which was.
But it doesn't have the time.
You're right. It doesn't have the. It doesn't have the time. What's that?
Sorry, it's 1 to 6 p.m.
1 to 6 p.m. Thank you.
Yeah, that was the time it was voted on. So yes.
And then also I was gonna say, typically a retreat like this, we wouldn't do it in person. If it wasn't a pandemic, we would be able to have water or some sodas or something like that, and some food. So why don't we make it a little similar to that, but we don't have to eat together, but bring food to the meeting and we can munch on it while we work through this, because it is a pretty lengthy meeting.
Yeah, and we'll try to have a break in the middle, but it is very casual. It's very casual. I'm wearing a hoodie today, and normally I would be at least dressing up if we were meeting in person, and this is even more casual. So,
so you're gonna come in just your t-shirt then?
Probably. It'll be warm enough by then.
Okay.
Pants.
But I saw Michael's hand. I'm so sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
Hi there. So I just wanted to check to see if it would be possible, because I know I'm getting my second dose of the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine next week. And I imagine, well, all Oregonians will be eligible for the vaccine by that point, or at least all adults. And would it be possible for at least those of us who are a week or two out from our second dose to be able to meet in person for this retreat?
So not for this one. And the reason for that, I will also be vaccinated at that point. I have an autoimmune issue, which scheduled me early for it. But I want to make sure we have at least a month and a half between when everybody's eligible and when we consider opening back up for a regular meeting. The other reason for that is because I know from experience with running other hybrid meetings that the people who are online often don't have quite as much of a voice as the people who meet in person. And I want to make sure for a meeting as important as this that nobody, through my own imperfection, like just I don't make mistakes by not fully considering people who are online, and making sure that nobody's excluded from in-person conversations or side conversations before everybody has a chance to get the vaccine. And it is a conversation topic that we need to consider. I don't think for this one, the commission is quite there yet, but I am also eager to see all of you in person and to put this year behind us, take the good lessons from it and forget the rest. Yeah. Any other questions, or we can move on to closing comments. Jeremy?
Yeah, so the front of the packet, we still have May 13th listed as tentative. Now, in the past couple of years, or last couple of times we did the retreat, we canceled the May Police Commission meeting for that month. But I know that we were leaving that open as tentative just because this has been such a strange year that things.
Yeah. So the reason that's still tentative, thank you for reminding me, because we had to move pepper ball policy to this meeting because our conversations last meeting took so long, we had to bump out the examination of the domestic violence policy. So that's obviously a very important policy that we can put on the work plan and just go from there. Or it's important enough, and with, as Jeremy said, everything being as weird as it has been, we could also just schedule a single issue meeting for May 13th. I don't have a decision on this. I would be interested in hearing your all availability for 2 meetings in 1 week. I know it'll be difficult for my work schedule, but it'll be worth it if the commission feels that way. V?
Sean, for clarification, we discussed that in our planning meeting, and one of the option was to do like a 1-hour meeting, just for clarification. So
yeah, so it'd be a shorter meeting.
Yeah, it will be one short, bam, we're done, that kind of thing. So I see one supporter, and I don't know what do you want to do, Sean? Do we want to kind of get us a consensus of how?
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing thoughts if that. I'm kind of jumping on you in the last couple minutes of the meeting. Does anybody definitely want to do it May 13th? Go ahead and raise your hand, or
I'm not. That's our regular. I don't understand. That's our regularly scheduled meeting, right?
Yes. So May 13th is our regularly.
Taking an hour of that to prep.
Yeah. So, right now I'm operating off of the default that May 13th is canceled. There's no meeting May 13th. It's been moved to May 15th and the retreat, because that's a double long meeting. Now I'm discussing the idea of doing 1 hour on May 13th to look at the domestic violence policy, and then also do our full retreat as a separate thing on that immediate Saturday. And I don't want to overload people's schedules.
if I may, suggest something, maybe because, Dallas is not here and I don't know if Macy's hearing what we're talking about, but I would suggest that we send out a doodle just to get input from the other folks who are not here. So they're not left out. If we decide to plan this thing and go ahead and have the 1 hour meeting and they didn't know about it, I think that would be a miscalculation. So yeah, I would.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's enough uncertainty. Honestly, I'm leaning towards just canceling it, putting it on our next work plan, and making it one of the first things we tackle on the next agenda. In June. All right. Yeah, I don't like pushing things back indefinitely, but I'm hearing enough reticence, and without everybody here to agree to an extra meeting effectively, I'll bring that up at the work planning session on Saturday. So thank you all for humoring my indecision on that. Let's move on to closing comments. To put a nail in that, no meeting on May 13th. We will do the work planning session on May 15th, which is a 5-hour meeting from 1 to 6, and we will try to have a break in the middle of that, as per the doodle poll that we sent out a month ago. For closing comments, let's start with you, V, and then move on to Chantel.
Yeah, it's great to see everyone here. Thank you, Sean, for inviting Senator Manning to our meeting. That was very informative. Great discussions. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Chantel, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, it was nice seeing you all. And I just want to thank Bonnie for all of your research and bringing up topics that are outside of the box. I really appreciate your comments.
So Jennifer, and then Michael.
Just thanks everybody for being here, and I look forward to the 15th.
Michael, and then Alan.
Yeah, just also thank you to everyone for an interesting meeting. I'm continuing to learn.
Excellent. Alan, and then Ian.
Yeah, ditto that.
Excellent. Ian, and then Bonnie.
Yeah, just really great to see everyone. And as we continue to have opportunities to get vaccinated, I would just encourage everyone to be in conversation with folks. A lot of people in Oregon are both vaccine hesitant and vaccine passive. And from our partners at Public Health, they've reiterated the importance to be able to, in a non-judgmental way, listen. And I think as a group, we're really great at being active listeners, listening to understand. So I think these conversations with neighbors, folks who go to the same church as we do, folks we see at the dog park, are great opportunities to talk about legitimate concerns for the vaccine. And I think the way that we reach population immunity, herd immunity, is just by listening and having more opportunities to engage and just have those concerns be heard from folks that know and trust us.
Thanks, Ian. Bonnie, and then myself.
Thank you to everyone. It's nice to see you. And I'm also looking forward to the 15th. And also just wanted to say that after Lindsay left, I felt kind of sad actually. And because of that, I would maybe put it on the table, maybe, getting to know you all better. Because if you all left, then I would also be sad. So it would be nice to get to know you a little bit better, maybe. But I know. Anyway. And then finally, I was just wondering, Michael, if you could possibly, if it's possible, if you have settlement information for the city, like, do you have settlement information and like maybe some knowledge as to like complaints against the police, and maybe if you've seen any patterns that maybe in our policy, maybe we could also address, like if you have that kind of information, that'd be really cool to look at. If maybe you could provide it maybe during the meeting. The next one. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, I'm hoping that Michael, your work on the CRB as our liaison helps inform what policies we look at as well, not just for setting our work plan, but going forward into the future, as emerging issues. I want to thank everybody for coming, for giving your time. Macy, I'm assuming you still are not interested in or not able to give comment, but thank you so much for tuning in anyway. And with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, and I will see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.